arrived in Chengdu by train from Chongqing at the very beginning of December, and the first thing I noticed was how different the city felt immediately. Chongqing was all neon, fog and chaos, but Chengdu felt calmer and colder, way colder. The weather shocked me a little after Vietnam and even after Chongqing. So my first mission in the city was literally to run into the nearest Uniqlo and buy a sweater and a beanie before I froze. For some reason, Chengdu immediately reminded me of my hometown in Belarus. Not visually in an obvious way, but more in the atmosphere. White street, cold air, yellow trees. It felt really familiar. We spent the first hour just driving through the city looking out the windows. And this was an apartment we rented right in the city center for around $35 per night. Honestly, for that price in the middle of Chengdu, I was pretty impressed. After checking into the apartment, we headed straight to probably the most famous place in Chengdu, the Panda Base. And honestly, even the drive there was beautiful. The city slowly started changing outside the window. Fewer skyscrapers, more trees, little parks, open fields and bamboo everywhere. I heard that on weekends the Panda Base gets completely overcrowded, but we went on a weekday when it honestly felt pretty comfortable. When we finally arrived, the first thing I saw was this bird just casually walking around the territory. I think they were peacocks, which already made the whole place feel more like a giant park and a zoo. And the territory is huge. You could easily spend an entire day there without rushing. The Chengdu research base of giant panda breeding is basically one of the most important panda conservation centers in the world. Giant pandas originally come from Sichuan, so Chengdu is kind of the capital of panda culture. For a long time, pandas were actually endangered because of habitat loss and low birth rates. So a place like this became really important for breeding and conservation programs. A lot of the pandas here are born in captivity and then carefully prepared for possible reintroduction into protected natural habitats. The whole process is apparently super difficult because pandas are not exactly survival experts. Mostly sleep, eat bamboo for like half the day, randomly fall off things, and somehow still become one of the most loved animals on the planet. And yes, they really are this cute in real life. The baby pandas were probably the cutest thing I saw in Chengdu. They were just sitting there, eating and rolling around, looking completely unreal. Then we found the red pandas, which honestly looked more like tiny foxes or bears than pandas. The whole park is incredibly well designed too. There are walking paths through bamboo forests, little lakes, gardens, cafes and rest areas everywhere. At one point we stopped for coffee because after an hour of walking we still hadn't even seen the entire place. And then suddenly there was this huge lavender-colored field with a futuristic building in the middle of it. Honestly, I expected the Panda Base to be touristy and overrated, but it ended up being one of my favorite places in the city. We ended up staying at the Panda Base almost until closing time, and I'm glad we did because the sunset there was beautiful. The lights started turning golden, the bamboo looked even greener, and the whole place suddenly became really calm and quiet after most of the crowd slept. After that, we took a taxi back to the city center and headed towards the IFC Chengdu area along Chunhe Road, which is basically one of the main shopping streets in the city. The Chengdu at night looked completely different again. Everything was glowing with Christmas lights, luxury stores, giant screen and decorations everywhere. There were Dior and Gucci buildings that also looked more like art installations and stores. And of course, even more pandas. At some point I realized Chengdu is probably the only city where an enormous panda on a giant LED screen somehow feels completely normal. By the evening we were starving, so it was finally time for one of the things Sichuan is most famous for, hot pot. I had heard so much about Sichuan cuisine before coming to Chengdu because it's considered one of the most famous and influential region cuisines in China. Sichuan food is known for being spicy, but the flavor is way more complex than just hot. A lot of dishes use Sichuan peppercorns, which creates this really strange numbing feeling, like spicy and numb at the same time. You sit around the bubbling pot of broth and keep cooking different ingredients yourself: meat, mushrooms, tofu, vegetables, noodles, seafood, literally anything. Some broths were extremely spicy, some tasted herbal, some smoky, some almost sweet. A few flavors I genuinely couldn't even identify, but somehow everything still tasted amazing. And there are so many different kinds of hot pot restaurants in Chengdu. Fancy modern ones, tiny local places, traditional Sichuan-style restaurants where everything is covered in chili oil. After walking all day in the cold, sitting around a boiling hot pot in the middle of Chengdu felt kind of perfect. The next day we spent more time walking around the center of Chengdu, and honestly one thing I really noticed about China, and Chengdu especially, is how good the shopping is here. There are obviously all the big luxury brands and huge malls. What I liked even more were all the local Chinese brands and concept stores everywhere. I genuinely wish I had more time for shopping because every few minutes I kept seeing another interesting store. And of course I had to try on Gentle Monster glasses. Apparently Chengdu has at least 2 Gentle Monster stores, and both of them looked more like modern art museums and optical shops. Even if you don't buy anything, half the stores in Chengdu are just fun to walk through because their interiors are so over-designed in the best possible way. After that we went to Wenshu Monastery, which is one of the most famous Buddhist temples in Chengdu. And the atmosphere changed immediately the moment we walked inside. Outside the city felt busy and modern, but inside everything suddenly became quiet. Incense smoke everywhere, wooden buildings, soft chanting sounds, little courtyards, and people slowly walking around lighting incense and praying. Inside there are multiple temple halls connected by open courtyards and gardens. and every hall has different Buddha statue, lanterns, carvings, and details. I also loved how much contrast there is in Chengdu. 1 minute you're surrounded by giant LED screens and luxury stores, and 20 minutes later you're walking through an ancient Buddhist monastery in completely silence. That's probably one of my favorite things about China in general. After leaving the monastery, we kept walking through the center of Chengdu along Renmi South Road toward Tianfu Square. And one thing I kept noticing everywhere were stores full of jade. Tiny jewelry shops, luxury boutiques, entire showrooms dedicated only to jade carvings and sculptures. Some pieces were affordable souvenirs, and others probably cost more than apartments. Jade has been incredibly important in Chinese culture for thousands of years. Traditionally, it symbolizes luck, protection, harmony, and prosperity. And historically, it was considered even more valuable than gold in some periods of Chinese history. Some of the craftsmanship was insane. There were tiny, translucent earrings, detailed animal carvings, huge decorative discs, and sculptures in every possible shade of green, white, and gold. Eventually we reached Tianfu Square, which is basically one of the main central squares of Chengdu. And yes, the giant mouse statue you're watching over the square is very hard to miss. The whole area feels extremely open and modern compared to the older streets around it, with huge roads, glass buildings, and people constantly moving in every direction. What surprised me through was underneath the square, there's basically an entire underground shopping center connected to the metro system. So from above it just looks like a giant open plaza, but underground it turns into the maze of shops, food places, convenience stores, and endless corridors connecting different metro lines. China in general feels like it has entire hidden cities in the ground sometimes. After crossing the square, we ended up wandered through smaller streets nearby, full of little restaurants, snack shops, and local food places. There was food everywhere: skewers, dumplings, noodles, buns, things I couldn't identify at all, but still wanted to try. Later that evening, we decided to go see the famous Chengdu Twin Towers, which sounded like a great idea until we realized they were very far from where we were staying. So after a long taxi ride across the city, we finally got there at night. The towers are covered in massive LED screens that constantly change colors, animation, and graphics, so the entire skyline feels like some kind of futuristic cyberpunk show. The next day, we went to the Chengdu Natural History Museum. First of all, the building itself already looks futuristic from the outside, but inside it somehow gets even crazier. One of the main things the museum is famous for is its dinosaur collections, especially fossils connected to Sichuan itself. Apparently, Sichuan used to be home to a huge variety of dinosaurs millions of years ago, and a lot of important fossils have actually been discovered in this region. The giant long-necked dinosaurs completely took over the museum. And what's cool is that not everything is there is just replicas. Some exhibits are reconstructions, but there are also real fossils and original skeletal remains found in China. A lot of dinosaurs displayed their life during the Jurassic period, and some species discovered in Sichuan were actually named after places in the region. At one point I was just standing there trying to process how something that huge one casually exists on Earth. So museum also does a really good job with the presentation. It doesn't just feel like rows of bones and behind glass. There are giant murals, full prehistoric landscapes, interactive exhibits in insects, minerals and huge open halls where the skeletons almost look like they are moving through the space. And the lighting and scale made everything feel way more cinematic than I expected from a natural history museum. Some of the long-necked skeletons stretched almost across entire rooms. China keeps surprising me with how ambitious their museums and public spaces are. Everything feels huge, modern and extremely well designed. After the museum, we headed to SKP Chengdu, which felt less like a shopping mall and more like some futuristic underground city, and apparently that's exactly the idea. Most of the complex is actually built below ground level. So, from the outside it almost looks minimal and hidden, but once you go inside, it just keeps unfolding into these huge luxury spaces with giant metallic tubes, futuristic lighting and massive open halls. There were also these surreal decorations, moving figures, strange sculptures, and huge digital screens constantly changing visuals. SKP is also one of the biggest luxury shopping centers in China, so basically every major brand imaginable is there. And yes, I went into Gentle Monster again, but this time I actually ended up buying glasses there after trying on way too many pairs. One thing I also really noticed in Chengdu is how much attention goes into visual design everywhere. Even random corners of malls had these huge decoration installations with soft lighting, flowers, giant sculptures, and little lounge areas that looked almost too aesthetic to be real. The next day we left Chengdu for Dujiangyan, a smaller city not too far away that's surrounded by mountains, forests, and way more nature. The atmosphere there felt completely different from central Chengdu almost immediately. Our first stop was Panda Valley, and compared to the Panda Base in Chengdu, this place felt much more like an actual natural reserve than a city attraction. Panda Valley felt more immersive, like the pandas were actually living inside the forest rather than inside carefully designed enclosures. The whole area is built into the hills with bamboo forest, little streams, misty paths, and huge trees everywhere. And because the environment is more open and natural, it feels much closer to seeing these animals in the wild, especially the red pandas. At Panda Base they were adorable, but here they somehow looked even more magical because they were climbing through real forest areas, walking across branches, and sometimes casually wandering surprisingly close to visitors. At one point, one of them literally walked right past us like it owns the place. The entire park was also incredibly beautiful on its own. There were so many peaceful walking paths through the woods, soft winter light coming through the trees, little bridges, bamboo everywhere, and this perfect mountain reserve views in every direction. It didn't even feel like a zoo most of the time, more like spending the day inside a huge protected forest where pandas just happened to live. If I had to compare the two places, Panda Base felt more iconic and educational, while Panda Valley felt more peaceful and emotional. After Panda Valley, we headed towards the more touristy part of Dujiangyan, and this area ended up being one of the prettiest places we saw during the whole trip. The city is built around the Dujiangyan irrigation system, which is actually one of the oldest water management systems in the world still functioning today. It was originally built more than 2000 years ago, and somehow it still controls the river water without using a dam. Instead of blocking the river, the system redirects and splits the water naturally through channels built directly into the landscape. We walked along the river for hours. There were old wooden buildings, traditional Chinese roofs everywhere, tea houses right above the water, along covered bridges, packed with people. At night, the whole area became even prettier once all the lights turned on and the river started glowing blue under the bridges. Later that evening, we found one of the most absurdly aesthetic bookstores I've ever seen. This huge multi-level library with curved staircases, glowing shelves, and these endless walls of books wrapping around the entire space. It's one of those places clearly designed for people to take photos, but at the same time it was actually beautiful in real life too. Somehow the strip managed to feel cozy, chaotic, futuristic and ancient all at the same time. Cold winter air, yellow ginkgo trees, glowing skyscrapers, bamboo forests, spicy hot pot, pandas, and mountain rivers, all mixed together into one of the most visual beautiful trips I've had in a while. Sichuan really feels like its own world.